For more than 3 decades, Johnny Carson welcomed the biggest stars in America into living rooms across the country. Night after night, his calm voice, relaxed humor, and welcoming presence made audiences feel as if they were sitting in on friendly conversations rather than watching television. Celebrities laughed, joked, and shared stories under the bright studio lights, appearing safe, successful, and full of life. Yet looking back now, there is something deeply unsettling about some of those appearances. A surprising number of guests who once smiled beside Carson later died in ways that were strange, confusing, and never fully explained. Time has turned many of those light-hearted interviews into haunting reminders of how little anyone can know about what lies ahead. As one former producer later admitted, watching those episodes today feels eerie because viewers are seeing talented, vibrant people who have no idea that their lives will soon end under circumstances that continue to raise questions decades later. The contrast is sharp and disturbing. The controlled, comfortable world of late-night television stands in complete opposition to the chaotic, often mysterious endings that awaited some of its guests. These were people who joked easily on Carson's couch, only to later become the center of investigations that still puzzle experts and fuel speculation. Among these stories, one stands out as especially troubling: the case of a woman who appeared on the show more than 100 times, delighted audiences with her comedic chemistry, and then died alone on a foreign beach in circumstances that remain unclear to this day. To millions of Tonight Show viewers during the 1970s and early 1980s, Carol Wayne was instantly recognizable. She played the matinee lady in Art Fern's Tea Time movie sketches, a recurring character known for her breathless voice, exaggerated curves, and seemingly innocent confusion whenever Art Fern made obvious double meanings. The humor came from her wide-eyed reactions and her apparent inability to understand what was really being said, and audiences loved it. Comedy historians later pointed out that Wayne's success was not just based on her looks. She had excellent timing and a specific kind of innocence that worked perfectly against Johnny Carson's deliberately sleazy Art Fern character. Their chemistry felt natural and effortless, and it made the sketches some of the most memorable moments on the show. While her television persona appeared bubbly and carefree, her real life was far more complicated. Behind the scenes, Wayne struggled with money problems, unstable relationships, and, according to friends, a growing dependence on alcohol and drugs. Her situation worsened in 1982 when The Tonight Show was cut from 90 minutes to 60. The popular Tea Time movie sketches were dropped, and Wayne lost what had been her main source of income. Her television appearances faded, and her personal struggles deepened. In January 1985, 3 years after her final appearance on The Tonight Show, Carol Wayne traveled to Manzanillo, a resort town in Mexico. She was accompanied by a man named Edward Durst. According to Durst's account, the two argued on January 10th. He claimed that after the argument, Wayne left their hotel room to take a walk along the beach. She supposedly left behind her passport, money, and personal belongings. She never returned. 3 days later, fishermen found her body floating in the shallow waters of Santiago Bay, only a short distance from the hotel. Carol Wayne was 42 years old. Almost immediately, questions arose. Drowning in calm, shallow water is rare for a healthy adult, and friends said Wayne was afraid of the ocean and not known to swim. Suspicion deepened when it became known that Durst left Mexico soon after filing a missing person report, before Wayne's body had even been discovered. Mexican authorities ruled her death an accidental drowning, but that conclusion left many unsatisfied. No thorough autopsy was performed, leaving unanswered questions about whether she had been intoxicated or injured before entering the water. The investigation itself was brief and lacked detail. The mystery grew darker when people learned more about Edward Durst. In a troubling coincidence, he had also been present during another mysterious death years earlier. In 1974, he was with Diane Linkletter, the daughter of television personality Art Linkletter, on the day she fell from a 6th-floor window and died in what was officially ruled a suicide. The fact that the same man was connected to 2 unusual deaths involving entertainment figures has long disturbed investigators and true crime researchers. Statistically, such coincidences are rare, and they have kept suspicions alive for decades. What makes Carol Wayne's death especially heartbreaking is how sharply it contrasts with the joyful, playful character she brought to life on television. The woman who made millions laugh through exaggerated innocence met an end so unclear and poorly investigated that the full truth may never be known. When Bob Crane appeared on Johnny Carson's show in the 1960s and early 1970s, audiences saw the perfect television star. As the lead actor in the hit sitcom Hogan's Heroes, Crane played a clever, charming American officer who outwitted his Nazi captors with humor and intelligence. He embodied an image that felt wholesome, confident, and trustworthy. Television historians have described him as the ideal leading man of that era, someone who could appear clean-cut and slightly mischievous at the same time. Middle America embraced him, and his success seemed secure. What neither Carson nor viewers could have imagined was that behind this carefully constructed public image, Crane lived a secret life that directly contradicted his reputation. That hidden world would come to light only after his death, and it would permanently reshape how he was remembered. On June 29, 1978, Bob Crane was found brutally murdered in his apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona. He had been bludgeoned to death, and the crime shocked the entertainment world. As investigators searched his home, they uncovered hundreds of photographs and videotapes revealing an obsessive sexual lifestyle that the public had never suspected. The material showed Crane with numerous women in explicit situations, carefully documented over time. At the center of both Crane's secret life and the murder investigation was his close friendship with John Henry Carpenter, a regional sales manager for Sony. Carpenter had introduced Crane to early video recording equipment, and together they used it to document Crane's encounters, creating a large collection of homemade recordings. The night before his death, Crane had performed in a dinner theater production in Phoenix. The next day, he was found dead. The murder weapon was never recovered, but investigators believed it may have been a camera tripod, an unsettling detail given Crane's obsession with filming his private life. Although much circumstantial evidence pointed toward Carpenter, including blood found in his rental car that matched Crane's rare blood type, the case was weakened by poor investigative work and limited forensic technology of the time. Years passed with no resolution. Finally, in 1994, 16 years after the murder, Carpenter was brought to trial. He was acquitted and continued to deny any involvement until his death in 1998. The case remains officially unsolved. What makes Bob Crane's story particularly disturbing is how completely his death changed his legacy. Before the murder, he was known as a successful sitcom star. Afterward, he became defined by scandal, secrecy, and an unanswered question about who killed him. Books, documentaries, and even a feature film have explored the case, yet the central mystery remains unresolved. When Sam Cooke appeared on The Tonight Show on February 7, 1964, he was far more than just another musical guest. He was one of the most important voices in American music, standing at a turning point in his career. That night, he performed A Change Is Gonna Come, a deeply emotional song inspired by his experiences with racism and segregation. Music historians later described that appearance as a historic moment, one that showed Cooke moving away from purely commercial music towards songs with strong social meaning. Tragically, that performance no longer exists, as the network later taped over the episode. Only 10 months after appearing with Carson, Sam Cooke was dead. On December 11, 1964, Cooke died under circumstances that remain controversial. The official story claimed he was shot and killed by motel manager Bertha Franklin, who said she acted in self-defense. According to this version, Cooke had checked into a motel with a woman named Eliza Boyer. Boyer later said she fled the room when Cooke became aggressive. Cooke, believing she had stolen his clothes, allegedly stormed into the manager's office wearing only a jacket and shoes, attacked Franklin, and was shot during the struggle. Authorities ruled the killing a justifiable homicide after an inquest that lasted only about 30 minutes. Many people immediately questioned how quickly the case was closed. Family members, historians, and civil rights scholars have pointed out inconsistencies in the evidence. Cooke's body showed signs of a beating that seemed more severe than what the official story described. Boyer, whose testimony was critical, was arrested shortly afterward on prostitution charges, raising concerns about her credibility. Beyond the details of that night, the larger context of Cooke's life adds to the suspicion. He had recently started his own record label and publishing company, giving him unusual control over his music at a time when black artists were often exploited. He had also become increasingly outspoken about civil rights. Many believe that the rushed investigation failed to properly address these factors. Cooke was not just a singer, he was becoming a powerful voice for change, and his sudden death silenced that voice at a crucial moment. Natalie Wood was another familiar face on Johnny Carson's couch during the 1970s. By then, she was Hollywood royalty, admired for her beauty, talent, and long career. She had grown up in front of the camera, successfully making the difficult transition from child star to respected adult actress. Film historians often describe her as living cinema history. From her childhood role in Miracle on 34th Street to her rebellious teenage performance in Rebel Without a Cause and her later dramatic successes, Wood represented an enduring kind of stardom. The basic facts of her death are widely known, but their meaning is still debated. In November 1981, Natalie Wood drowned off the coast of Catalina Island while on a boat with her husband, actor Robert Wagner, and their friend Christopher Walken. The official ruling was accidental drowning, possibly influenced by alcohol. However, over the years, witnesses, changing statements, and unanswered questions have kept the case alive in the public imagination. Conflicting accounts of what happened that night, along with Wood's known fear of water, have led many to doubt the original conclusion. Decades later, the case was reopened, and although no charges have been filed, Natalie Wood's death remains one of Hollywood's most discussed and debated mysteries. Taken together, these stories create a chilling pattern. The Tonight Show was a place of laughter, charm, and apparent safety, yet for some of its most memorable guests, life after Carson ended in confusion, violence, or unanswered questions. Watching those interviews today, it is impossible not to feel a sense of unease. The smiles, jokes, and easy conversation feel frozen in time, unaware of the darkness that would follow. These deaths continue to fascinate not just because of fame, but because they highlight how fragile and unpredictable life can be. Behind every polished television appearance was a real person, carrying struggles, secrets, and futures no one could foresee. The mysteries surrounding their deaths endure, not only because the answers are unclear, but because they remind us how thin the line can be between the bright lights of fame and the shadows that sometimes wait just beyond them. On November 28, 1981, Natalie Wood was spending the night aboard a yacht called the Splendor near California's Catalina Island. She was there with her husband, actor Robert Wagner, her co-star Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. What happened during that night has remained one of Hollywood's most debated mysteries. At some point after dark, Wood somehow ended up in the cold ocean waters. Her body was found floating the next morning. She was only 43 years old. At the time, investigators quickly concluded that her death was an accident. The official explanation was that she may have been trying to get into a small dinghy tied to the yacht, possibly after an argument, slipped, and fell into the water. The fact that she was wearing a heavy down jacket seemed to support the idea that she never planned to swim or intentionally enter the ocean. On paper, this explanation closed the case, but in reality, it left many people deeply uneasy. Natalie Wood was famously afraid of dark water. Friends and colleagues had spoken for years about her fear of the ocean at night, making it hard for many to believe she would try to climb into a dinghy alone after midnight. Adding to the confusion, people on nearby boats later said they heard a woman crying for help sometime around midnight. That timeline did not fully match the version of events described by those who were on the Splendor. For years, these details were dismissed or ignored, and the case remained officially closed. However, questions never went away. In 2011, nearly 30 years after Wood's death, authorities reopened the investigation after receiving new information from several sources, including Captain Dennis Davern. Davern later stated that Wood and Wagner had been involved in a heated argument that night. He claimed he heard signs of a physical struggle and said Wagner delayed calling for help after Wood disappeared. These statements cast new doubt on the original conclusion. The case took another dramatic turn in 2018 when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department publicly named Robert Wagner a person of interest. Investigators pointed to Wagner's changing stories over the years and his refusal to cooperate with authorities after the case was reopened. While this did not mean he was officially accused of a crime, it marked a major shift in how the case was viewed. Natalie Wood's death continues to fascinate the public because it combines fame, marriage, secrecy, and unanswered questions. On that yacht were her husband and another famous actor, all within an isolated setting where only a few people know what truly happened. The truth feels close, yet remains just out of reach, locked inside memories, contradictions, and silence. Another Johnny Carson guest whose death continues to raise suspicion is Dorothy Kilgallen. When she appeared on The Tonight Show during Carson's early years, she brought seriousness and authority to the program. Kilgallen was not just a celebrity guest. She was one of the most powerful journalists in America at the time. She wrote a nationally syndicated column that appeared in more than 200 newspapers, hosted a popular radio show, and was a familiar face on the television panel show What's My Line? Her presence carried weight. When she spoke, people listened. By the time she sat on Carson's couch, Kilgallen was deeply involved in what would become the most controversial investigation of her career, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. She openly doubted the official explanation and had been conducting her own research. On November 8, 1965, Dorothy Kilgallen was found dead in her New York townhouse. The scene immediately struck those who knew her as strange. She was discovered in a bedroom she never used, fully dressed in clothes she had worn the previous day. She was sitting upright in bed, wearing reading glasses, with an open book beside her. Friends and family said this was completely out of character. Despite these unusual details, her death was quickly ruled the result of an accidental overdose involving alcohol and barbiturates. Officially, The case was closed. But many questions were never answered. Kilgallen had no known history of abusing prescription drugs, and the specific combination found in her system made little sense to those who knew her habits. What made her death even more suspicious was the timing. In the weeks before she died, Kilgallen had told friends she was close to revealing shocking new information about the Kennedy assassination. She had conducted a private interview with Jack Ruby, the man who killed Lee Harvey Oswald, and believed she had uncovered important facts. After her death, all of her research notes related to the Kennedy case disappeared. Those close to her insisted she kept her files carefully organized and stored separately from her other work. Yet after she died, that entire collection vanished without explanation. The investigation into her death raised even more red flags. No full autopsy was performed. Toxicology samples were later destroyed. Her death certificate contained multiple errors. Each of these details alone might be dismissed, but together they form a pattern that has kept suspicion alive for decades. Dorothy Kilgallen's death represents more than the loss of a journalist. It represents the disappearance of information that may have challenged powerful narratives, leaving behind a silence that can never be fully filled. Peter Ivas was another guest whose life ended violently and mysteriously. When he appeared on The Tonight Show in the early 1980s, he stood out as something different. Ivas was a highly educated musician and the host of New Wave Theatre, a cult television show that introduced underground punk and alternative bands to a wider audience. He brought artists and ideas to television that mainstream America rarely saw at the time. He moved easily between elite academic circles and the raw energy of the punk scene. This made him a unique cultural figure, someone who connected worlds that normally did not touch. On March 3, 1983, Peter Ivas was found dead in his Los Angeles apartment. He had been beaten to death with a hammer in an act of extreme violence. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that he likely knew whoever killed him. Friends described Ivas as gentle, thoughtful, and not someone with enemies. The brutality of his murder shocked everyone who knew him. What made the case even more tragic was how badly it was handled. When police arrived, basic investigative procedures were ignored. Friends were allowed to walk through the apartment, contaminating the crime scene. Evidence was not properly collected. Fingerprints were missed. Authorities appeared to treat the case as just another killing in a dangerous neighborhood rather than the targeted murder of a notable cultural figure. Over the years, many theories have been suggested. Some believe the murder was connected to drugs that circulated within parts of the punk scene. Others think it may have involved personal relationships or jealousy. Some suspect professional tensions or resentment toward Ivas for bringing underground culture into the spotlight. What haunts those who study the case is the belief that the truth might have been discovered if the investigation had been handled properly. Unlike some mysteries where clues are scarce, this was a crime that should have left clear evidence. Instead, mistakes and neglect allowed answers to slip away forever. David Carradine was another Johnny Carson guest whose death stunned the public. During his appearances on the show in the 1970s, Carradine was known for his calm presence and philosophical tone. He became famous for his role as Kwai Chang Caine in the television series Kung Fu, playing a peaceful Shaolin monk who wandered the American West guided by Eastern philosophy. That image followed Carradine into real life. On Carson's couch, he spoke thoughtfully about spirituality and balance, reinforcing the idea that he lived by the same principles as his character. On June 3, 2009, Carradine was found dead in his hotel room in Bangkok, Thailand, where he was working on a film. He was discovered hanging in a closet with a rope around his neck and another rope tied around his genitals. Authorities initially described his death as an accident involving autoerotic asphyxiation. This explanation shocked the public and clashed sharply with Carradine's spiritual image. However, even that explanation raised serious questions. Carradine's hands were reportedly bound behind his back, a detail that made it difficult to understand how he could have tied the ropes himself. This fueled speculation that his death may not have been accidental. Carradine's family, especially his brother Keith, pushed for further investigation. They suggested he may have been murdered and pointed out that Carradine had been researching criminal organizations in Thailand for a possible film project, something that could have placed him in danger. Thai authorities ultimately ruled the death accidental, stating there were no signs of a struggle. An independent pathologist hired by the family concluded Carradine had not committed suicide, but did not definitively state whether someone else was involved. The case remains difficult to resolve because it took place in another country with different investigative standards and limited access to evidence. As a result, the truth about what happened in that hotel room remains uncertain. Looking at these stories together, a pattern begins to emerge. These were people who appeared confident, successful, and in control when they sat beside Johnny Carson. They laughed, entertained, and presented polished versions of themselves to millions of viewers. Yet their lives ended in ways that were confusing, violent, or poorly investigated. From Carol Wayne's unexplained drowning in Mexico to Dorothy Kilgallen's suspicious overdose, from Peter Ivas's brutal killing to David Carradine's strange death overseas, fame offered no protection. In some cases, it may have even complicated the search for truth. What makes these cases especially haunting is the sharp contrast between the safety of Carson's stage and the chaos that followed in real life. On television, everything was orderly, scripted, and brightly lit. Off-camera, reality was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. Natalie Wood and Sam Cooke are perhaps the clearest examples. Their Tonight Show appearances captured them at the peak of their talent and influence, with no hint of the strange circumstances that would soon end their lives. Watching those interviews today feels different. Moments that once seemed ordinary now feel loaded with meaning, as if viewers are searching for clues that were never meant to be seen. These mysteries also reflect the social and power structures of their times. Natalie Wood's case raises questions about domestic conflict and accountability among the wealthy and famous. Dorothy Kilgallen's death suggests the dangers faced by journalists who challenge powerful institutions. Sam Cooke's case highlights how suspicious deaths involving Black Americans were often quickly dismissed during the 1960s. When these stories are viewed together, they reveal how fame can both shield and expose, how investigations can be rushed or mishandled, and how uncomfortable questions are sometimes left unasked. For modern viewers revisiting these Carson interviews, there is an unavoidable sadness. These were vibrant individuals, unaware that their lives would later be defined not only by their achievements, but by mysteries that refused to fade. Their stories remain unresolved, living on in documentaries, books, debates, and late-night conversations. The questions they leave behind may never be answered, but they continue to remind us that behind every smiling television appearance is a human life, fragile and unpredictable, moving toward a future no one can fully see.